He'll switch after he gets on.
Yeah, okay.
No, I'm kidding.
All right, thanks.
Are you ready?
I don't know, I guess.
B3.
Should we be? Sure.
We're ready.
I was waiting for the on-air
The
sign.
sooner we start, the sooner we can.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to our regularly scheduled meeting of the Town Council for February 16th, 2016. Councilor Rell, if you can lead us in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dolores?
Counselor Bello.
Here.
Counselor Hammond.
Here.
Counselor Hurley.
Here.
Counselor Tina.
Here.
Counselor Martino.
Here.
Counselor Rell.
Here.
Counselor Spinella.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Barry.
Here.
And Mayor Montanaro.
Here. Thank you, Dolores. We're going to start this evening with a presentation about the Wethersfield Early Childhood Collaborative, and Martha and Kim are here this evening. Thank you. And you have the floor.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. My name is Kim Bobbin, and I'm the program coordinator for the Wethersfield Early Childhood Collaborative.
I'm Martha Keneally. I am the accountability coordinator for the Wethersfield Early Childhood Collaborative.
And we're here to talk to you tonight about investing in early childhood. We have a brief presentation, and we'll have time for questions at the end. The Wethersfield Early Childhood Collaborative, or WEC, is a diverse group of community members and local organization. WEC connects advocates, parents, programs, and services for young children. Data drives our work. Our objective is to identify areas of focus and get everyone working toward the mutual goal of making children in Wethersfield better off. We track issues and engage partners to take action. WEC is part of a 10-year initiative called the Discovery Initiative. The purpose of the Discovery Initiative was to help towns in Connecticut develop local early childhood infrastructures, and Martha's going to tell you a little more about that. WEC has been funded by the Graustein Memorial Fund, the state of Connecticut, and the town of Wethersfield. We are here tonight because this 10-year initiative is sunsetting, and we would like to begin a community conversation about the next steps for early childhood in Wethersfield. In the past, the town and the Board of Education have each contributed $2,500 annually to WEC. We are looking for the town and the board to increase their investment in early childhood so that Wethersfield children can get the start that will allow them to be successful when they enter our school system. So why invest in WEC? This is a time when we are all being asked to do more with less, and the needs of our families are becoming greater. The good news is that WEC has created an engaged network of community partners. Our biggest success has been in bringing people to the table to talk about issues and take action. Before the collaborative, each of these groups operated in silos. WEC has succeeded in engaging these partners to work together so that the collective impact of our work is greater. Our partners understand the needs of our families, they support our work, and they are ready to continue working collaboratively to ensure that all Wethersfield children are healthy, ready for school, and connected to the community.
As a collaborative, we use data to sharpen the focus of our work. Many council members attended our annual meeting where we took an in-depth look at the data, and members of the public have seen our community plan, and we've spent the last year visiting PTOs and community organizations, spreading the word. So we're not going to go in depth on the data picture tonight, but for those of you in the audience who haven't seen our numbers yet, we wanted to take a quick look. Investigating local data has highlighted areas of need in our community. For instance, we've learned about issues with health. For example, data shows us that almost 30% of moms in Wethersfield are not receiving adequate prenatal care. This is above state average and out of step with our neighbors. In terms of school readiness, we've seen a concerning decline in preschool preparation. What's very helpful is that the data allows us to look at our community as a whole or to disaggregate the numbers and look at specific groups. By example, let's take a look at an at-risk population group. And here we're going to take a peek at the numbers of children who qualify for free and reduced price lunch in Wethersfield. This is an indicator we use to connect, that we connect to both health and school readiness. First, as we're here, we're looking at our communities as a whole. The red line represents the state of Connecticut, and the blue line is the town of Wethersfield. While we remain below the state average, you can see the number of children receiving free and reduced price lunch has doubled in the last 10 years. Now we're going to drill down and look at a specific community, in this case, the Webb School. As you can see, this is a pocket of much greater need. In the graph, the red line represents Wethersfield and the blue line represents Webb. As you can see, there's been a more dramatic turn of the curve for Webb. In that same 10-year period, 3 times as many children are receiving free and reduced price lunch. The data also allows us to look at our community versus other communities. We're going to take a quick look at our birth rate and how it compares to our neighbors. I really love this indicator. It's a simple indicator, but it has a powerful message. A lot of us have heard that the birth rate in Connecticut is declining, about 15% statewide over the last 10 years. On this graph, we can see how this is played out in Glastonbury. They are the orange line. About 100 less babies were born in Glastonbury in 2012 than in 2005. This is the kind of data that plays into Glastonbury's decisions regarding their schools and what they're keeping open. But that's not the case in Wethersfield. We are the blue line here. We've actually seen a slight increase in our birth rate. It's up about 1.6%. We have a stable population of young families in Wethersfield. They're buying our homes, they're eating in our restaurants, and of course, they're going to our schools. As a community, we need to think about how we're meeting the needs of these youngest residents and their families. So what's the vision for how our community can meet these challenges? We believe we need to develop our early childhood infrastructure. Now, typically when we think of infrastructure, we're talking about our roads, our sidewalks, and our buildings. When it comes to early childhood infrastructure, we're talking about making deliberate choices to create and support a coordinated and strategic system that expands Wethersfield's capacity to meet the needs of young children and their families. We envision an infrastructure that will include physical plants, such as a family resource center, an effort to support and expand high-quality early care and preschool slots, a coordinated effort to address the health and well-being of very young children through programs such as home visitation and maternal health outreach, and a plan to engage the families of young children and connect them to our community. We know there's a need. A focused effort to build our infrastructure will allow us to be proactive in meeting it. The big question, though, is it worth it? Now, time and time again, research has showed us that early intervention pays off in terms of both the health and learning success of the child. So I think we can see the direct benefit of it to the child and the family. We know that investing in early childhood infrastructure will improve our children's health, help get them ready for school, and strengthen their family's connection to the community. But let's look past that immediate impact to the wider community impact and the more pragmatic point of view of why we believe investment in early education will benefit all Wethersfield taxpayers. We'll start by looking at the issue from the point of view of economic development. Whether we're talking about a business looking to set up shop in Wethersfield or families considering the purchase of a home here, the prestige of our local early care system should be both a strong selling point for our community and a source of economic growth. High-quality early care allows parents to hold jobs, work longer hours, and even enhances productivity because of the knowledge that their children are in good hands while they're at work. It's good for businesses because it leads to a reduction in employee absenteeism and turnover, which increases worker output. Finally, early care and education is an important economic sector, generating jobs and demands for goods and services. Last year, this industry generated revenues of $41.5 billion and employed 873,000 individuals in the United States. The spillover impact of these programs through the purchase of other goods and services, generated an additional $42 billion for local economies. WEC can work with partners to connect the care dots, facilitate family access, and enhance the quality of early care in Wethersfield. Secondly, research shows that this is an investment that will pay off for our community. As the council is well aware, a typical K-12 education in Wethersfield costs about $14,000 per child annually, while the education of a child requiring early interventions, or any interventions, can cost many times that amount. Is there a way to avert some of these costs? To answer that question, we look to the research of Nobel Prize-winning economist James Heckman and what is known as the Heckman equation. Heckman's extensive research in this area has influenced federal and state legislation, with support coming from both sides of the aisle. The basic idea is that the earlier we invest in our children, the greater the long-term savings. A conservative estimate is that $1 invested in early care saves $7 in the long run, but we've heard upwards of $20 of long-term saving for each dollar invested. The cost would be broadly shared and benefit the entire community. My paper's stuck. Finally, developing our local early child infrastructure will put us in the right position to take advantage of external community investment. As part of our work, our collaborative tracks public and private funding opportunities related to the expansion of Connecticut's early childhood system and advocates for Wethersfield to be included in appropriate programs. The message we've gotten from our community from both public and private funders is that infrastructure attracts external investment. A local commitment to being partners in early childhood investment will help to steer resources and funding our way. Throughout Connecticut, communities that have built some form of local infrastructure are benefiting from the financial support of state and philanthropic organizations. We're showing examples of just a few of those communities where this is played out, but I'm going to use West Hartford as an example. Though larger than Wethersfield, West Hartford is also an inner-rig suburb that has seen a shift in community demographics over the last 10 to 20 years and has a similar pattern of need. In the case of West Hartford, I think it's fair to say that they have been more proactive than we have in setting up an early childhood system to meet this need. West Hartford schools have supported an early childhood curriculum specialist, a dynamic family resource center, home visitation programs, school-based NIAC-accredited preschool programs, and parent leadership programs. School and private providers share professional development opportunities. Their comprehensive system took years to create, but their local investment has paid off in the form of state and philanthropic funding to expand and enrich those programs. Without that infrastructure in place here in Wethersfield, we're leaving money on the table. But as I said, local investment is key. Public and private funders want to see local commitment before they're willing to bring in their resources.
In January, we shared this presentation with the Board of Education, and we are happy to report that the Board of Education has put funding for WEC into their proposed budget. We hope that the town will consider our proposal, and we look forward to working with the town and the board regarding ways that we can build on the work of the past few years and ensure a solid infrastructure to support our youngest children and their families. At this time, we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Kim? Sure, Mike.
Hi. Do you envision like working with the centers in the community that are already kind of in place?
We already have partnerships with many of the preschool providers in town. WEC over time has set up opportunities for professional development for those providers. There's been discussions about creating collaborative council of preschool providers, but it's about building our own infrastructure to have the capacity to build those partnerships and continue to build those partnerships.
Other questions? So the timeline, if I'm not mistaken, I know we have several moving parts going. The board is involved. We're going to be involved through the budget process. We are having some discussion with community supporters, obviously. I know we have talked about that. The program that you wrote for the grant for the position is finished and presented, correct? And then
Yes.
And maybe just mention that. I think that you didn't skip over, but I just think you want to talk a little bit about how you got that use of the grant to get the position description created.
Want me to talk a little
Oh,
bit
yeah.
about that? So the Graustein Memorial Fund, like we said, they're trying to set you up for success in your town. They're trying to give you the capacity to do these things in your town. So they have provided us over the last 10 years with a consultant to help us work on this. But we also applied for additional funding to help us work on strategic planning. And one of the things that we found through WEC was that we've been kind of always worried about sustainability, right? Can we continue to fund this? And when we finally decided to move forward and say, we're doing this, we're gonna find the funding, Graustein came back to us and said, well, we will give you a consultant to help you with that strategic plan and build a vision for Wethersfield. So let's not just worry about next year, what are we doing, but what are we doing the year after that, and 5 years from now, and 10 years from now? And what is the vision that we want for our families? A funder that we met with talked about a brand for Wethersfield. What kind of branding? What do we want when people think about Wethersfield and they think about families and children? What do we want them to think about? And Graustein has provided us with funding to do that, so.
And that's in the packet too for folks to read, so. Jody?
So I'm just curious, what does the 25,000 go to? Is that for that position, or is that?
Yeah, it would be a position, but it's, there's also a possibility of beginning more programming, and we believe that with the 25,000, the commitment of the 25,000, it will also allow us to attract further potentially planning grants from philanthropic partners that we could use towards starting the process of, hopefully, whether there's an actual physical family resource center or a family resource program within our community for our youngest children, and so developing that resource for our families.
And how does it work with the program, the pilot program over at Webb?
The pilot program at Webb is actually, that's a preschool that is that's for our, it's a state mandated program that we provide for children in need of interventions, as well as peer playmates. And so we would be supporting children entering that program, any preschool. We want to expand preschool offerings in our community. Only about 85% of children last year went to preschool. 30% of the kids who went to preschool outside of our community. We want families to have opportunities to send their children to preschool in Wethersfield. We want to make sure we have appropriate preschool offerings across our community. That program in and of itself is not enough to meet the needs of our entire community.
Where are you guys envisioning that this would be housed?
The actual physical space, that's a question to be answered as we go forward. That's definitely something that we would have to look at our community, what we have available.
And how would it work with, and I think this might piggyback on what Mike Hurley was asking, with the existing preschool programs that are in town?
There's opportunities for them to expand their offerings or to receive greater support. We were
talk a little bit about West Hartford.
Yeah, we were just in West Hartford the other day and talking to them about the program they have available, and they have vibrant private preschools available. They have preschools that they've built right into their schools. This doesn't happen tomorrow. This has taken 20 years for them to build, but they started with one preschool in one school. Now they will have preschools in almost they're going to have something like 8 preschool programs within schools. But they also have been able to use school readiness dollars to provide tuition for children to go to private schools within their town. So somebody might go to a NIAC accredited private preschool in their community, and there's funding available for those children as well. And so it's not about, it's about building our own system, giving great opportunities for local businesses to expand their offerings, having the opportunity for more businesses to come into Wethersfield and set up shop to meet the needs. We have an unmet need, and it's a great opportunity to expand. It's a business opportunity even for preschool providers.
Does it reach the level of like the choice program that we have with some of the surrounding districts, or is that just K through 12.
Choice actually has available, if you bring in 10 Choice pre-K students, you receive $10,000 per student, so it's $100,000. And then there's also infrastructure grants that you can apply for preschool. Wethersfield is not eligible to apply for that because we don't have a full-day pre-K. So if you wanted to apply for open choice grant funding for pre-K, you have to already have a full-day pre-K system in place, which we don't have.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
you very
Thank you
much.
for coming. We're going to move into public comment. Anyone here this evening wishing to speak? Public comment? Bob?
Good evening, Robert Young, 20 Copper Mill Road. This was a very interesting discussion you just had regarding this collaborative effort to increase more education to the children at even more cost to the town. We have a school system that has a lot of programs. We have preschool, learning or classes or expenses right up to high school, as well as right up to the age 21. You know, we have a whole gamut of expenses here that we're currently faced with without adding more. You know, I heard that it'd be a great business opportunity here to do something great, and that there's other organizations out in town doing some of these things, partial some of these things. I don't honestly know, but if they're out there, let them do what they're doing. And I know it was just mentioned a moment ago that this $25,000 could be used for numerous things, which I thought I heard even to have a resource center. We're now going to be probably having this, I don't remember what it's called, but this academy for learning for the children that are 18 to 21 years old. We're going to probably have a standalone for that too. And all of this belongs in the school system, Mayor. The school system that should be responsible for this. I don't think we, the citizens, should be funding more and more other opportunities. If we just look around town of the different organizations that the town of Wethersfield funds, that they don't own, but funds. I think it's so out of hand. And to expect the citizens to pony up. We citizens, Mayor, I believe give generous at the contribution box for charity. But to force us into it is wrong. And that's really what this is all about. Forcing you to give charitable money to somewhere. And that's not right. That should not be happening. I would urge you to bypass this opportunity. Tonight, I noticed on your agenda, you're going to be talking about the attorneys, hiring an attorney firm. And, you know, looking at these dollar amounts that these attorneys charge, I would say that the Jackson O'Keefe law firm looks better to me than any of them, especially with our high legal fees that we've been having. And that Jackson Keefe says that if the fees exceed $100,000 a year, the hourly rate drops to $155. That's a incentive to go with them. And I don't know who they are. I don't know what their performance is. I do know the performance of several of these others I don't think is very great. I think we've talked about this several years ago, about performance I haven't seen, I mean, let's face it, your attorneys, the main job is to foreclose on people or handle some issues between several people in the town or a person in the town. So, those things are very common things that they do. It's not like they're in business stretching their limits of what they know, or, they're just doing common things. And these kind of prices, I think, are high, but I think the Jackson O'Keefe's looks better to me than any of the others. I've been noticing in the newspaper that numerous towns are coming out with their their grand list dollar amount, or what their increases are. And I know last year Wethersfield was 1.34%. Are we doing any better, Mayor? Or do you have an idea when we're going to be hearing that number for the town of Wethersfield? I mean, that is a driver. That is a big driver to any tax increase. And we keep seeing these tax increases. And if we don't have the driver of grand list going up, that means those who are left, they're paying a higher amount to support that government that we have here. And if that includes all these collaboratives and whatnot, I mean, we're in big, deep trouble. I know the state is looking for all kinds of ways of finding taxes, including the legalization of pot. I think that's, it's bad enough we have alcoholic people on the highways, but having these other ones is, I just don't believe we need that, And I know that there's just so much going on, Mayor. And I want to thank Dolores. She did send me a message regarding that meeting that was going on down in Wethersfield, down in Middletown tonight. Of course, I'd rather come here. After all, 5 years I've been calling the office of the governor, giving him my 2 cents, and he's never taken my phone call, so why would I go out of my way to visit him down in Middletown? But anyway, we continue to see, because of his actions, more cuts and slow growth throughout our entire community. And to spend more money at this point, and as a matter of fact, right at the beginning of the recession, we should have been reducing our costs, but we kept increasing it. And as we increased it, the propensity of us to bail our butts out of the problem that we were in, you just put us in deeper problem. It's going to be longer to get out of it because of your economic theory. And that got us into where we are today. This is what I call your economy. It's not my economy. It's your economy. All these troubles that we have, all these money problems. I mean, look, last time I was here, you were voting on another grant or two or whatever, and you're always voting on grants. Where do you think that grant money comes from? These ladies that were up here tonight talking about they're getting some grants. Where do you think that money's coming from? Not out of anybody's taxable, where revenue comes in, it's all borrowed. It's all borrowed money. The state of Connecticut just borrowed $600 million, and next thing you know, in the newspaper, all these towns are getting this and that, 100 here and hundreds of thousands. And I was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago where I heard some people talking about, oh, there's a grant that we can get in for our town to do something on a certain building. We can get $1 million. And I'm sitting there saying, yeah, $1 million. Where do you think it comes from? It doesn't come from what we think of revenue. It's borrowed. And someone has to pay it off. Our children are going to have to pay it off. Maybe these ladies are right. We got to get these kids educated, but I don't see it happening.
Thank you,
And
Bob.
I would really recommend, Mayor, you consider no,
Thank
because
you.
we just can't afford it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anyone else wishing to speak this evening? No other takers? So captivating. Thank you. All right, council reports. Council reports this evening. Tony, got something upbeat and positive for us?
Yes, the Capital Improvement Advisory Commission has been meeting over the past few Wednesdays. And I'm happy to say that last week they did their final interview and they went through the process. And they picked a list of projects to be considered next year. They stayed within the $905,000 budget you had given them and came in at 903. So they're currently taking their list and preparing it for forwarding to Planning and Zoning for the annual 824 referral. In addition to those lists, they also prioritize some other projects so that if funds do become available, we can add without having to reconvene that group. The Budget and Finance Committee met and considered and interviewed individuals for the town attorney's position. Their recommendation is being considered tonight under item B3A on the agenda. The Public Works Infrastructure Committee met. We had discussions regarding the purchasing of the streetlights and maintaining them ourselves, converting them to LEDs, hiring a contractor to do the job for us, which will save us a substantial amount of money. What we voted on that night, instead of creating a subcommittee, was to have our town staff first go through, who are the experts on this, to analyze with the 3 vendors that CCM has recommended and get their input, and then come back to the committee for further discussion and then presentation to you. We figured their expertise was more prudent than us committee members trying to do it ourselves. And there was supposed to be a conservation meeting this past week, but due to a lack of quorum, it didn't meet. That's my report.
Thank you, Tony. Council reports, anything?
I did
Steve?
attend the building committee meeting on last Monday. Again, the project moves towards completion, hopefully by the end of this calendar year. And highlights, we do have a matter on the agenda for this evening. The projectors was a change order, but most significantly, at this point, at least as of the last meeting, the auditorium, which is probably the next thing to come online, is scheduled to come online by the end of March. I do know that there is a drama play that is being held at Webb this month, but when that is done, or in March, but when that is finished, at the end of March, the auditorium is slated to open. So I think that's exciting both for the students, but also for the community. That's going to be a piece of the high school that's used not just by students, but obviously many members of the community. So that's probably the most exciting thing that happened at that meeting, was that report.
Thank you, Steve.
Oh, I just have a question for
Good.
Steve.
Yes.
Did the committee finalize the FF&E budget? I know we were waiting for that information to come back to us.
There was nothing new at the last meeting. I don't believe, Jeff, was there anything else on since our last council meeting?
The BOE has an estimate of 1.2 million for FF&E. We're just locking down that number to make sure that's the number. But they should be at or about that number when they're done. That's the estimate so far. And
Yeah, my sense was from the last discussions that in all likelihood, that number will be, it's gonna be either at or slightly below.
Right.
Not over, was the.
but they're getting an estimate from their furniture vendor on the final phases of construction.
Thank you.
Anything else? Council comment? Council comment this evening? Tony?
Okay, Tom.
2 things. Just want to say the Board of Education's been having budget workshops the past few Saturdays. They're having hopefully their final one tomorrow night, because their plans are to get their budget to finalize budget on their agenda for their next meeting. Some of us counselors have been attending those, and some of us will be there again tomorrow night. We're there just to get input to hear what's within their progress. And also just wanted to remind people out there that this coming Sunday is the usual annual Unico Pasta Dinner. They normally serve about 1,000 people. They're sauce and meatballs are made from scratch with a secret recipe. And they have many fundraisers, money which help various organizations put in town.
Thank you, Tony. Mike?
Oh, just want to let people know the Wethersfield boys track team won the Class L state champions this past weekend. They have the state championship, overall state championship coming up this weekend, and 4 of the boys will be going to nationals in March.
That's great news.
Is one of them Pat Hurley?
One of them is Pat Hurley.
Congratulations. Very nice.
He's been running away from his father for years. Anything else?
Congrats.
It was good stuff. Okay, Jeff, anything?
No, for the council members, we keep you up to date over time, but there's been 20 different fire calls in the past 24 hours. They have been busy. CO2 alarms, broken pipes, damaged heaters, a lot of those public service calls that you rely on a volunteer fire department to make and keep your community going. So they've been busy, but they've done a great job. So if you get a chance and you see them, thank them. They're out there all the time.
Yeah.
And it was cold.
That's very
It
good.
was cold.
Thank you. Dolores, anything?
The reason the flags on front of Town Hall were not lowered is because they were frozen in place. I did get one call about that this afternoon. Also, we have the list of who the candidates are going to be for the presidential primary on April 26th. It's going to be Hillary and Bernie, and then we have, for the Republicans, it's Jeb, Ben Carson, Ted Cruz, John Kasich, Marco Rubio, and Donald Trump. That's not the order, but the ballots won't be in that order, so you'll have to pay attention to where they are on the ballot when you vote. It's not too late. You can register to vote up until April 21st, so the registrars are expecting more people to come. And the MDC sent notices out that about the water. You may have noticed that you get them in your bill once a year. And the other is that some of their bills are mixed up this time. You may have the wrong bill or 2 bills in your envelope, so check it out before you pay it. That's it.
Well, that's interesting. Is it a lower bill or a higher bill?
If it's 2 of them, it's not
You
going to
can
be
get
lower.
2 of them.
Not necessarily
Pick the
your
lower
own.
and throw the higher one out.
There you go.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to add an agenda item. Steve?
Motion to add to the agenda, item B3C. It is to refer to the Planning and Zoning Commission under CGS 8-24, the rental of 370 Silestein Highway for use by the Wethersfield Board of Education as the Wethersfield Transition Academy.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any question on that? All in favor? Opposed? Abstention? Thank you. We'll move into council action. Exceptions of resignations. Steve?
Bear with me for a second. Sadly, I move to, thank you. I move to accept the resignation of Phil Necht from the Disabilities, the Wethersfield Advisory Committee for People with Disabilities, and the Fair Rent Commission. Phil was a longtime volunteer in town and active in the community, and he passed away this past month. So I move to accept his resignation.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Thank you. Appointments? Tony? I'll let you appoint.
Okay. Motion to add Andrew Persea of 203 Maple Street to the Cox Cable Television Advisory Council for the period 2/16/16 to 6/30/18.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? Thank you. B1C.
I'd like to make a motion to disband the following building committees due to completion of their projects effective immediately. The Town Hall Library Building Committee, the Town Hall Library Building Committee 1 and 2, Community Center Building Committee, Saddlestein Middle School Building Committee, the Webb Stillman Physical Services Building Committee.
Second the motion.
Motion and a second. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. As stated in the memo, these building committees have finished their work, and we're recommending disbanding those by action of the council. Since you all created them, you have to disband them.
Questions about that from council? I think,
I
Mike?
have one question. Just, are we looking at other committees, like to maybe put together and
Yes.
like get rid of some more committees?
We did.
Okay.
We have had some discussion about that, and it's going back to a couple of subcommittees just to tighten up some recommendations that Jeff has made, and should be the next month or so. Other questions about this motion? It's fairly straightforward. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Thank you, Jeff, for the work on that, by the way. We will move on to other business, 3A.
Motion to appoint the law firm of Rome McGuigan as town attorney for 2015 through 2017.
Second?
Motion and a second. I'll let Jeff take us through the first portion of this, and I think the committee may want to chime in.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In accordance with the charter, the town is required to solicit RFPs for town attorney services every 2 years. The firm or the person is selected for a 2-year term, and at the conclusion or by the conclusion of that term, there's another process to select a town attorney. It could be the same one, could be a different one, but there's a process required. The process was undertaken starting in December. That process resulted in the solicitation of proposals from 7 firms. Those 7 firms were narrowed down to 2 firms, which were interviewed, and the committee is recommending the appointment or the retention of Rome McGuigan for another 2-year term.
Anything from the committee itself?
The committee reviewed and first selected the firms to be interviewed. Then we called the firms in, interviewed them, and based on the firms that both firms had expertise in the multi-factions that the town legal needs are for, and that's why those 2 were selected for interview, and the majority selected Rome McGuigan to be the town attorney.
Good. Questions from Council? Mike Curley?
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
Just to go along with what we discussed in the meeting. In the Finance Committee meeting, we talked about appointing Halloran and Sage as an assistant town attorney. We would have flexibility to use more than one firm if it was in the best interest of the town, and we let the town professionals direct the legal dollars to the most efficient services. We have 2 insurance agents. We have several engineering firms on call. So I just wanted to amend to appoint Halloran and Sage as assistant town attorney for the same term.
I second that amendment.
Okay, motion. There's a motion, a second to amend. Any comment?
My personal opinion, we have used multiple firms in the past. When one is busy, work is presented to the others, and they work back and forth, and that's worked well over the years. I think just maintaining a town attorney only, and then if we need help, we could go to another firm, such as the second place firm.
Other comments?
I would agree with that, Tony. I think it's a 2-year term. The reality is that we have overlap. At this present time, Halloran and Sage was the prior town attorney and is continuing to do work. I think we select a single town attorney for the term. It's more streamlined, it's straightforward, and we're getting quality legal work, frankly, from both firms, but I do think it's important to have one firm as our town attorney.
Jody?
Does an assistant town attorney cost us anything?
They would just be like on call.
So at no cost, it's just a designation? Something to think about.
And I think the reality is, I think if Jeff needs help with someone, he goes to the firm that is designated as the town attorney. There hasn't been a need for overlap. There's not that much legal work that the firm has not been able to handle it, so.
Unfortunately, lately, you have.
So it just seems unnecessary, and I think it's clearer to have one town attorney, and proceed in that fashion. That's my own belief.
Donna, you had a question?
Yeah, we have had an assistant town attorney in the past, in the early 2000s, both on record. So, I think this makes sense. We're using both firms, and it just puts both firms together. The primary certainly would be Rome McGuigan, and then an assistant would be Heller and Sage. That's just my opinion.
Mike, you want to chime in?
We did have a number of tax abatement appeals go through Haller and Sage in the last, or Rome McGuigan in the last 2 years. It's my understanding that one of the attorneys that had worked for Rome McGuigan has left that firm and was handling our tax abatements. Just wondering if that firm has somebody on staff with the expertise to be able to handle those. And if not, maybe somebody from Haller and Sage would. And it would be that opportunity to utilize a second law firm, at least in that particular case.
Jack, you're here, so I'm going to take a privilege and ask you to respond to that. If you can come up, that'd be helpful.
Well, I think I did
Yeah, if you could get up and just identify Jack for the record. Appreciate it. Thank you.
John Bradley, 480 Wells Road. I did work on the tax incentive agreement for Ridge Road, and we have, as our proposal indicated, we have the capability to handle most matters, and when conflicts arise, we certainly and have referred and continue to refer matters to Haller and Sage when the need arises. But I think that the original, back in the, as Councilor Hammond indicated, back in the, certainly through the 90s, that was when one individual person could handle the legal work of the town. There was one town attorney, and there was one individual who was a assistant town attorney. And I know that because I was the assistant town attorney back in the early 90s and through much of the 90s. So then we went to a system where a firm generally was the town attorney, and that's how we've functioned since then.
Thank you, Jack. Any other comments, questions?
So
Go ahead, Joe.
did they lose their tax abatement attorney?
I think it's the tax appeals, and you handled the tax appeals with the assessors, didn't you?
Sorry to make you come back up.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I personally handled the tax appeals with Chandler Rose and now with Fauna Eller. So Morris handled a few of them, but I handled the vast majority and probably 90% of them.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Thank you, Jack. Other comment? So,
Jody, within the interview process, they did say, each firm said who had the capabilities of, the different functions that we needed. And both firms had capability within their firm to handle all the various requirements that we have. So Jack does have people, available to take care of the tax appeals, as does Haller and Sage.
Thank you.
so we have a motion on the amendment. Let's vote on that first, then we can go to this. All in favor of the amended motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Opposed?
Opposed.
No? Do you have it, Dolores, I assume? 5-4, okay. So let's go to any other questions on the initial proposal? Any other dialogue? Okay, so we have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Motion passes 9-0. Thank you, Jack, for being here.
Jack, can you wait until we're done with Princeton Street, just in case there's any questions, please? Thank you.
Okay, and that leads us to Princeton Street.
Leaves the room.
B3B.
Is Princeton Street up now?
Yeah. Where'd he go?
That's why we need a deputy town.
Jeff gets the same reaction from his wife when he asks him things, too. She
my
just leaves the room, too.
Come on now.
Kidding.
Motion to request referral of the Wethersfield Planning. Motion to request referral of the Wethersfield Planning and Zoning Commission under CGS N 824 on whether the paper street known as Princeton Street should be accepted by the town as a public road.
Second.
Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Princeton Street is what we call a paper street, originally designed or platted back in 1915, but never developed or dedicated to the town. There's a series of 4 lots that are off the main street that would have been fronting on Princeton Street had it been constructed. The owner of those lots would like to now construct those, but needs a public road to make that happen. And Jack's going to have to explain the legal issues that are behind this, but at this point, the developer is willing to build a full-scale, as required public street and develop those lots. And that's been one of the hangups, but of course, there's been the issues of title and so forth, but I think we have it resolved. But the council would have to go back to planning and zoning and request that the street actually be dedicated or accepted as a public street.
When it's done. Yeah, Jack, if you can come up and just address that for us. Thank you.
What happens when you come to the meeting, it's good for business, I guess. Bill it now, right?
Glad to see you can cover everything, Jack.
Sorry.
I think the manager stated it, but this is just a proposal to, anytime you consider purchasing land, selling land, locating public utilities, accepting roads, it must go first to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a report. So this involves, as the manager said, Princeton Street, which runs off of Knott Street. Many are familiar with the Ivy League streets over there, Yale and Princeton and Harvard and other streets of those names. They're on old subdivision maps, and most of them were built, but some of them were not built. And Princeton Street is one which was never actually constructed. So for the past 10 years or so, various developers have sought to develop a couple of lots on Princeton Street, and now they went through various plans. They've done all kinds of legal research on the title to the lands and stuff like that, and they've come up with a plan to that at least preliminarily looks like it could be a viable 4-lot subdivision along that. So you're not approving any subdivision, you're not accepting any street, you're just sending it to planning and zoning to consider it as a planning matter. And planning and zoning will make a recommendation to you. At some point, it may come back to the council to consider whether you want to accept it as a street. So it's a very preliminary step that's sending it off to planning and zoning for a report.
Jack, and obviously, the neighbors within a certain number of neighbors within the area will get notice of that when it goes to planning and zoning, correct?
There'll be notice, there'll be a hearing, right, but I think they've actually been notified because there's been a lawsuit. The developer brought a lawsuit to what they call quiet title to say that he has the right to use that old street, and that lawsuit is pending, and that's really, there was actually, you may recall, a settlement proposal brought to the council maybe a year and a half, this is how long ago, maybe 2 years ago, that was not acted on, but that lawsuit is still out there, and it seems to be moving in a direction where it could be workable, and this is a step that is required along the way.
Other questions from council on this? Fairly straightforward. Good. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you, Jack.
Motion to request a referral under CGS 824, the lease of 370 Silestein Highway for use as a Wethersfield Transition Academy.
Second?
Motion and a second. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. The Superintendent of Schools has asked that the council refer the use of 370 Silestein Highway for use as the Transition Academy to the Planning and Zoning Commission. As the town attorney has stated, anytime we do these types of things, we need some kind of report from the Planning and Zoning Commission. So we're asking to refer that to them for their report.
Questions on this? I know many of the council members have seen the facility through the walkthrough and the visit with the district, as well as the members of the staff. I know Sally's here if there's questions, but I think this one's pretty straightforward to keep it on track, because I think they're trying to get in front of P&Z.
What does the P&Z have to officially do, I guess? They just have to approve it as a school-type
Well, there's a
building?
zoning case that evening that allows for the zone, use of that as a school.
Okay.
And then the 824 is it consistent with the comprehensive plan? Is it an appropriate type operation for the town to undertake? So there'll be two questions that night. One, which is a more of a recommendation and referral, and the other is a formal zoning case that's been noticed, and there'll be a hearing and so forth.
We haven't had one of these before. Is this something that would normally just take one meeting? Because some of these things kind of drag on for, do you know?
Which one, the zoning hearing or the
The
824?
zoning hearing.
They could leave it open for more information depending upon what happens at the hearing.
Okay.
It's set for March 1st.
I know that they have requested several pieces of information from Fred Bushy in advance of it to be prepared, so I know they're trying to move it along, given the delay from the previous misstep, so. Donna?
Once this takes place, will we get additional detail?
Yes, you'll get a report back, because eventually, if this were to happen, the town council, as we did in the past, would have to enter into the lease
Right.
rather than the Board of Ed. So you would get the report from the Planning and Zoning Commission, you would get the results of the zoning hearing, all that in your packet for your consideration on the lease.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mike Rell?
Did planning and zoning, did they review the last tentative agreement of the previous location for the Transition Academy?
They did not.
They didn't do this portion of it?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. In favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Solomon Wells.
This is a motion to accept the bid from General Builders LLC for $47,000 foundation repairs and $20 per square foot for additional drywall, plaster wall repairs for the Solomon Wells house.
Second?
Motion and a second. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Kathy Bagley's here this evening to answer details on this, but as I stated, the contract to fix the foundation is $47,000. There is some plaster drywall repair in the base bid. The additional $20 per square foot is if we go over the $32 that's allotted for in the $47,000 base contract. So Kathy Bagley's here this evening to go over this.
Kathy?
Good evening. This work is to do a permanent repair of the foundation on the north side of the Solomon Wells house. Back months ago, we did a temporary repair when we noticed that the kitchen floor was sinking a little bit. We brought in a structural engineer to check it out. We had to go in and do a temporary repair, and as part of that, you have to do the permanent repair fairly quickly. So that's what this piece is about.
Kath, one question I have, did all of the contractors that bid on this actually come in and spec this and look at the foundation? And I ask that because the range is so great on these bids.
We did a walkthrough. It was a walkthrough prior to the bid. We actually had 12 vendors show up and walk. They were in the kitchen, they went into the basement, they were outside, we showed them everything.
Okay.
They just all had different methods of looking at how to do the repair.
Okay.
And if I might, the low bidder is the one that did the temporary repair?
Yes,
So he's pretty familiar with what's there and what he fixed.
yeah,
and-
what he had to dig out and
Yeah,
everything.
and it's, I mean, obviously, it's a reputable local firm that everybody knows, so that's a good sign as well. Questions from other counselors on this? No, this has been in the mix for a while. Mike?
Kathy, did, when the contractors looked at the work that needed to be done, did any of them say what was causing the structural weakness to cause the foundations to crumble or, you know?
What the engineer told us, not the contractors, is that the foundation, the current foundation, it was, I'm not gonna use technical terms, but if you can appreciate, it was sitting on a wood beam that was notched into the supports of the house. And somehow that wood beam twisted and the supports of the house came out of those notches. So when they had to go in and do the temporary shoring, they had to dig under that and support the whole thing. And the permanent repair is gonna be the digging up of the foundation from the outside of the house, doing temporary shoring and jacking it up a little bit to get it back level and putting in a concrete foundation.
Okay.
So that's the process that's gonna happen.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Kathy? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Thank you, Kath.
Thanks.
B4B.
Motion to approve proposed change order number 546 with Ferguson Electric in the amount of $27,329 for data cabling and power supply for classroom projectors.
Second.
Motion and a second. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. This is a change order to do some additional electrical work to accommodate some overhead projectors in the classrooms. The original specification called for some wireless connections, which now the technology just isn't there yet for a wireless connection to move at the speed that a wired connection would. So they're gonna go back and run some cable and some power supplies in these classrooms. Mike's here to answer more details.
Just walk us through it, Mike, a little bit.
Sure. If you recall, last summer, Keith Raffanello from the board came and we made a presentation on the change in the direction that the board wanted to make in terms of the teaching platform in all of the classrooms. There's 72 classrooms that we're dealing with the renovation. And the original concept was to use like smart screen TVs and with all the powering and the cabling that those required. The swap over was to the short throw projectors. That gives more flexibility to the teachers. It allowed the teachers to sit at their desk, use their laptops, and project anything and everything onto the boards. So what this change does is provides power and data drops to those between the projectors and the teacher station. The projectors were actually purchased separately, so they are mounted in the classrooms that have been prepared so far. But this is has basically been negotiated. Originally, Ferguson had quoted us something like $47,000 for this work. The architect and O&G sat down with them, and what we're doing now is we're actually using unit prices that were set in their original bid to provide the power and the data drops. So obviously the price came down substantially, and this was voted on and recommended by the building committee at their last meeting.
And that was a unanimous vote, Mike.
It was.
Questions for Jeff? I mean, for Mike on this?
Is this the last change order?
Oh, God, no.
Probably
No.
not. Probably not, Donna.
I can say absolutely not.
From, related to electric?
Probably throughout the whole building, I would be surprised if it were.
Yeah. The contractors right now are working on this phase right now, which is called Area F, and they're working on 17 classrooms. The subsequent phase will be an additional 12 classrooms. So we're going through still various stages of the building that we haven't touched yet. So, but this is for the projectors in all of the classrooms. So what has been completed and what is yet to come.
And Mike, obviously, we've gone through contingencies and all of that, in terms of the contingency budget. This was an item, I believe, that had already been projected back in past budget, so
that's
this
correct.
isn't increasing or decreasing
Correct.
our contingency,
The
correct?
funding for this would come from our construction contingency, but ONG has accounted for this since the swap over to projectors.
Last summer.
Last summer.
Correct.
So they've been carrying a number for this work.
Okay.
I have a question then. If it's been since last summer, they don't have to tear out any walls or go through to put wires through, right?
No.
Okay, so they planned for all that?
Yes, that's correct.
Mike, I just want to understand something you said in your explanation. So the initial proposal that came through at some $49,000 for this, that was presented to the building committee, the building committee, along with the architect, went back and reviewed this with Ferguson and referred to a specific price list that was included in the original bids?
That's right. In the original bid, we solicited unit prices, just as Kathy's bid, where you just awarded,
Yeah.
had a price per square foot for the plaster. In this case here, we had price per power drop, price per data drop, things like that. And we were able to apply that. In this case here, it came out to our advantage to use the unit prices. Sometimes it's better off to negotiate with the contractor outside of the unit price, because the unit prices, when you add them all up, it may be easier for the contractor to lump things together. In this case, it wasn't. It was to our advantage. So kudos to ONG and the architect for.
Yeah, because that's a substantial.
And this was presented to the committee, I think, back in July, and the committee said, listen, that is just,
It's too high.
it's too high, and you can't justify that expense. So it's a good example of the building committee itself saying, listen, go back and you gotta take another look at this, because that's not a realistic price. So they've been doing that on a number of change orders along the way. Occasionally, there'll be a change order where something will be new, but there's some savings. For example, you don't need to do as much when you do the change order. So they've been getting credits along the way, but that's sort of the process that's gone through, and this is probably a good example of that process.
Some drilling in,
And there were some savings.
substantial. Good. Okay. Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstentions? Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
We have a resolution for introduction purposes only, and I believe we have minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of February 1st, 2016.
Second that.
Any changes, additions, modifications in it?
I have a change.
Go ahead, Amy.
Dolores, on page 3 of my comments, can you add an E to Noreen Wamister's name? She has an E at the end. That's it.
That's it. Anything else? Okay, motion is second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Thank you, Donna. Public comment? Public comment? Any other public comment?
I was here because I got a notice from Northwood News regarding a meeting tonight.
P and Z, where was that? I think it was a different location, right? Something about the,
Can I see the
P and Z is tomorrow.
did it get moved to tomorrow?
Is it?
I thought it was today too, because I thought the sign said that. I thought they just moved it.
I believe he put a sign on the door outside and tried to correct it, because whenever we have to meet in this room, they take the next night.
Hold on, let me check.
Wait, hang on, Linda, we'll check. 1 second.
Mike, it's posted on the front door.
We'll just check, Linda, just to be sure, but I think it is tomorrow. I think it did get moved.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, planning and zoning tomorrow night.
Is it P and Z?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is P and Z.
Yeah, it's tomorrow night, this room,
At 7.
at 7. Yeah, tomorrow night. Yep. You can come on back. We're here every day.
Yeah. And we know you were captivated to be here tonight. Yeah. Yeah, nice to see you, Lynn. Okay. Any other public comment? Mr. Young.
Good evening again, Robert Young, 20 Copper Mill Road. Your choice of the attorney that you picked tonight was not the low bidder. He was the higher of the two choices that you wanted. And I still think you missed
It's not right.
the low bidder.
Doctors and lawyers, you don't have to.
Tonight, you also spoke, and I know it was on the agenda, regarding the Solomon Wells House and the new foundation, or the repair of a foundation. And I didn't realize that they were going to replace it. I thought it would be old stones being put back underneath there to keep it into the idea that it's a historic house. And, you know, when you consider the fact that that building as a house, just a building, not historic value or anything like that, it's not worth a lot of money. And then to put 47,000 plus plastering and who knows whatever else it's going to bring you up to, it seems like you're throwing a lot of money into something that doesn't have a lot of worth as a building. I mean, if that building cost $150,000 to be replaced, and you're putting $50,000 in repairs, you know, it's not like it's a $600,000 house. Doesn't seem right. But this goes back to the fact when you own property, it costs a lot of money to maintain it. And cutting your losses is really the way on something like this and get out of it. You might want to consider divesting yourself, the town, from that property, as well as other properties that we have in this town that we own that other people are using. Divestiture would save us a lot of money, Mayor. Now, it was mentioned that that new foundation repair was going to be concrete. And there was an article in the paper just this week, I believe, regarding people who were having some problems with concrete cracking. Their homes were 30, 40 years old. You probably saw the same article. I have it right here. And the fact is, nobody really knows at the moment why those homes had their cracks. And there was a lot of cracks. We saw that in the paper. I have it here somewhere. And you know, here now you're going to put in just normal concrete. I hope that you get some assurance and long-term guarantee that this won't happen to this building. I mean, you know, we just can't have things done and then years later something bad happens because now we're at it again, replacing it. Just like these people, they have to replace their whole darn basement. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I read it. I mean, what a shame to own something and then it's going to cost you $50,000, whatever the dollar is, and I forget what it was, to replace the whole basement. And here you are, you're going to replace one wall. And how long will that wall last? We think of concrete lasting for lifetimes, but at least I do. But anyway, we continue on, Mayor, and you know, we continue to have hard times here. If you noticed in the Hartford Current, and I'm sure you did, funds are being reduced for the F-35s that are being produced up at Pratt & Whitney. It's only a few engines, but then the real ripple effect is it ripples down to Sikorsky and it ripples over to Electric Boat. And, you know, there's going to be quite a few components, units that are not going to be produced. And we're going to see a ripple effect come through, whether it's people that live here that go to Pratt and work, or they go down to Sikorsky and work, or they're vendors that are supplying. these operations where things are going to back off. And do we really know that this is the true number? We don't really know. And the same goes along with electric boat and your submarines. You lose, I remember that I knew somebody who had lived here and worked down at the sub base. I don't know where he is now, but the fact is people do travel. And it can affect some of your people. And as it affects, how do they pay their bills as they continue to live here? So I would really urge you to do something about your budget and reducing it down. Then there was another article, dead-end life on the road. Some poor woman who has to travel around, she's from New York, but she has to travel around in a van because she has no money except for enough to keep the van going. And then, of course, the van's breaking down. And, you know, people out there are having some very difficult times. And I don't believe there's anybody up here that really understands that. Because as I've seen over the years, the way the tax bills have been coming in, there isn't any concern for what's happening out there. And then, of course, we have the state of Connecticut, Yukon. President is complaining. She doesn't like the cuts. And the students are complaining they don't like the cuts. Well, it's just too darn bad. I mean, we can only pay so much. And I already think we're paying much more than what we should have to pay to keep these operations going. And it happens right here in this town as well. And that's why I keep coming back, and I'm going to keep coming back. I'm not going to go to Middletown and listen to the porcupine talk. You know, I'm going to come here. And hopefully I'll make some sense here with you folks. I don't know, that's another hard sell. And then, of course, we have the yard goats. And you know, we hear so much about those yard goats. I can't believe the name. I can't believe a baseball field up there. I can't believe they're talking about a casino up there in Hartford or somewhere. I mean, this whole thing is crazy. It's because the entire state lives way beyond its means. Like I said earlier, now they want they want a pot, they want to make legal, so of course they can tax that too. They don't care about us citizens who have to drive on the highway and somebody coming the other way is popped up and hits us. They don't care about that, but they care about their taxes. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Mr. Young,
And
thank
I hope
you.
you will give a lot of consideration to the tax issues in this town.
Thank you
Because
very much.
reality is setting in. It's setting in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Before we adjourn, I'm compelled to make a comment, and I think on behalf of all of our counselors, both sides of the aisle, as we're in the budget season. And I very much appreciate Mr. Young's comments as he comes up on a consistent, regular basis and points out topics that are important to him, and I think in many cases appropriately points out challenges for our residents and for our not just in Wethersfield, but our state and the many dilemmas that I think the state faces. But I'm sure every one of the counselors here, both sides of the aisle, who have been involved with a lot of discussion over the last couple of months and will continue for the next 3 months, will agree that the tax challenges for our town, our budget challenges, and as they extend into the state, as we all know, we have already heard from, I sat in the chamber 2 weeks ago and listened to the budget address, and both sides heard what I think is obviously a very challenging time for the state of Connecticut. But I believe sincerely that not a member of this council does not approach those dialogues without sincere interest in our community, our taxpayers individually and collectively. And I can tell you that I believe every one of our counselors understands the choices that we make, as difficult as they are, have impact on the lives of the residents that put us at this desk. And so while we recognize there's a push-pull, and many of the topics that Mr. Young talks about weigh on us, I will say one thing again that I've said before: it isn't about caring about our residents. It's about deliberating the challenges that we face and been asked to face and put us in this chair, all of us. So
on behalf of our residents, I think it bears repeating that nobody is approaching the budget dialogue without that in their minds. I know that this group collectively and individually could not be more sincere about their belief and the time that we're spending in the budget process to get to the absolute best for our community, taking into account all sides and all perspectives. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to what you said, Mr. Young, because I listened carefully to your comments, but I do take issue with the perception that any one of us doesn't care. That's absolutely not accurate. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.